13. Black celebrities who betrayed God. Faith built empires, saved lives, and held black communities together for generations. But what happens when that same faith begins to feel like a cage instead of a refuge? In this video, we uncover the untold stories of 13 black public figures who walked away from God, not for attention or shock value, but because belief collided with truth, identity, grief, and survival. These are not tales of hatred, but of ruptured doubt and difficult honesty. Some decisions shocked churches, others divided families, and all of them sparked controversy. Watch closely, question deeply, and decide for yourself. Subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence and stay until the end. This is not a comfortable conversation, but it is a necessary one. Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman's journey with faith is marked by reflection rather than rebellion. Born in 1937 in Memphis, Tennessee, he was raised in a disciplined Baptist household where church attendance, prayer, and scripture shaped everyday life. His grandmother believed faith provided moral order and protection in a society defined by segregation and limited opportunity. Like many black families of that era, religion offered stability, dignity, and a sense of belonging when the outside world felt hostile. As Freeman matured, curiosity slowly expanded his worldview. He became interested in science, history, and philosophy subjects that encouraged questioning instead of obedience. Service in the United States Air Force and later years in theater sharpened his fascination with human behavior, motivation, and belief. Acting exposed him to how stories influence perception, and this awareness gradually weakened his attachment to literal religious doctrine. By the time his career gained momentum during the 1970s and 1980s, Freeman no longer identified with traditional Christianity. He later explained that religion often functions as a human response to fear, mortality, and uncertainty. In a widely cited 2010 interview, he stated clearly that he does not believe God exists, framing his position as intellectual honesty rather than provocation or hostility. If faith provides comfort but resists scrutiny, should questioning it be considered disrespectful? Ironically, Freeman's portrayal of God in the 2003 film Bruce Almighty intensified public curiosity about his beliefs. Instead of strengthening faith, the role highlighted for him how easily authority and divinity can be constructed through narrative and performance. He also connected his skepticism to history, arguing that American Christianity frequently encouraged patience over resistance within black communities, sometimes discouraging direct challenges to injustice. Despite rejecting organized religion, Freeman does not dismiss spirituality entirely. He has expressed appreciation for Buddhist and Hindu philosophies, valuing awareness, balance, and personal responsibility over rigid doctrine. His decision to step away from God was not driven by anger or shock value, but by a desire for coherence between belief evidence and lived experience. For Freeman, integrity meant choosing truth as he understood it, even when it meant leaving tradition behind gracefully, calmly. Samuel L. Jackson. Samuel L. Jackson's relationship with religion reflects conflict rather than rejection alone. Born in 1948 in Chattanooga, Tennessee, he was raised within a Southern Baptist tradition where church was central to black community life. From childhood, Jackson attended services regularly, sang in the choir, and absorbed biblical teachings that emphasized obedience, endurance, and moral discipline. In an era marked by segregation and racial violence, faith was presented as both protection and identity. As Jackson grew older, real-world injustice began to challenge what he had been taught. During the 1960s, his involvement in the civil rights movement and exposure to political activism revealed contradictions between religious ideals and lived reality. He witnessed churches preaching patience while systemic racism persisted. This disconnect deepened during the 1970s when Jackson struggled with addiction. In that period, he felt religion offered little practical support, pushing him further from institutional faith. Jackson has since described organized religion as a system that often prioritizes control over empowerment. While he has never denied the cultural role of the church, he has publicly questioned its effectiveness in confronting inequality. In interviews, he has emphasized personal responsibility over divine intervention, stating that success and survival come from effort rather than miracles. Unlike some public figures, Jackson's stance is layered. He has openly supported abortion rights and LGBTQ equality positions that place him at odds with traditional Baptist doctrine. Yet he has also acknowledged continuing to read the Bible and donate to churches not out of belief, but respect for their historical role in Black communities. This duality highlights his refusal to embrace labels such as atheist or devout believer. His work often reflects this tension. In Pulp Fiction, his character quotes scripture while committing violence, symbolizing the gap between religious language and moral action. Later projects continued exploring moral ambiguity rather than redemption through faith. Jackson has stated that spirituality for him is internal rather than institutional. Samuel L. Jackson did not abandon religion impulsively. His shift emerged from decades of observation, struggle, and reflection. Rather than rejecting God to provoke controversy, he chose independence of thought. His journey represents a man unwilling to accept belief without results, choosing conscience action and self-determination over unquestioned tradition. Alice Walker. Alice Walker's separation from Christianity was not an act of rebellion, but a long intellectual and emotional awakening shaped by race, gender, and lived experience. Born in 1944 in Eatonton, Georgia, Walker was raised in a traditional Black Baptist household where faith offered comfort amid poverty and segregation. Church life, prayer, and hymns were woven into daily survival, and Christianity was presented as a source of moral order and hope in an unjust society. As Walker matured, education became the turning point. College exposed her to feminist theory, African history, and global philosophy, revealing contradictions between Christian doctrine and the realities faced by Black women. She began questioning why a faith that preached love often justified silence in the face of gender oppression and racial hierarchy. These doubts deepened as she reflected on how religion had historically reinforced submission rather than self-determination. Her novel, The Color Purple, published in 1982, marked a decisive shift. The story openly challenges the traditional Christian image of God, portraying faith as something imposed rather than discovered. Through her characters, Walker explored spiritual liberation outside institutional religion, emphasizing personal growth, female autonomy, and emotional honesty. The book was widely criticized by conservative religious groups, banned in several schools, and yet it won the Pulitzer Prize in 1983, confirming its cultural significance. If a belief system silences suffering, can it still claim moral authority? Shortly after the novel's release, Walker publicly stated that she no longer identified as Christian. She embraced pantheism, a worldview that sees divinity in nature, humanity, and the universe itself, rather than in a singular male deity. Walker argued that Christianity's dominant image of God reflected patriarchal and racial power structures that excluded Black women's voices and experiences. Despite accusations of abandoning tradition, Walker framed her decision as spiritual honesty rather than rejection of meaning. She did not dismiss spirituality, but redefined it on her own terms, grounded in compassion, creativity, and interconnectedness. For her, liberation required breaking free from beliefs that normalized suffering. Alice Walker did not walk away from faith lightly. She stepped toward a broader vision of the sacred one that affirmed identity, dignity, and self-worth. Her journey remains a powerful example of choosing inner truth over inherited doctrine. Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi Goldberg's departure from organized religion was shaped by experience rather than provocation. Born Karen Elaine Johnson in 1955 in New York City, she was raised in a working-class environment influenced by Catholic education and Jewish heritage. As a child, she attended Catholic school where prayer, confession, and obedience were woven into daily routine. For many families in struggling neighborhoods, religion represented structure, discipline, and moral certainty during unstable times. As Goldberg entered adulthood, that certainty began to weaken. During the 1970s, she faced periods of addiction, financial insecurity, and homelessness while trying to establish herself as a performer. In later interviews, she explained that the faith she had been taught offered little practical guidance during these years. The rituals felt distant, and the promises of protection did not match her lived reality. Doubt emerged quietly, grounded in disappointment rather than anger. Her skepticism deepened as she examined church teachings on social issues. Goldberg openly disagreed with Catholic doctrine regarding abortion, women's autonomy, and LGBTQ+ identity. She viewed these positions as rigid rules disconnected from human experience, particularly the realities faced by marginalized communities. Over time, she came to see organized religion as an institution that enforced conformity more than compassion. By the early 1980s, Goldberg had stepped away from formal religious practice. As her career grew, she spoke more candidly about her views, especially during her time on The View. She stated that religion is a system created by humans to explain fear and uncertainty, a position that sparked backlash from religious audiences. Despite criticism, she maintained that questioning belief does not equal moral emptiness or hostility toward others. Goldberg has emphasized that ethics do not require divine authority. She measures right and wrong through responsibility, kindness, and accountability rather than doctrine. Her performance in Sister Act 1992 is often misread as religious affirmation, but she has described it as a story about community and compassion, not devotion. Whoopi Goldberg did not abandon faith to shock or offend. She stepped away because the beliefs she inherited no longer aligned with her values or experiences. Her journey reflects a woman choosing honesty over obligation, humanity over hierarchy, and lived truth over inherited certainty. Neil deGrasse Tyson. Neil deGrasse. Tyson's departure from religious belief was not driven by rebellion or controversy, but by a lifelong commitment to evidence, curiosity, and intellectual consistency. Born in 1958 in the Bronx, New York, Tyson was raised in a Catholic household where church attendance, religious instruction, and moral discipline were part of ordinary family life. For his parents, faith represented stability and guidance, especially within a working-class Black community seeking order and opportunity. From an early age, however, Tyson was captivated by the natural world. A visit to the Hayden Planetarium as a child ignited a fascination with astronomy that would shape his entire life. As his interest deepened, he began asking questions that religion struggled to answer. When he asked religious instructors about the age of the universe or the mechanics of creation, the responses often relied on mystery rather than explanation. These moments did not anger him, but they unsettled his confidence in doctrine. As Tyson advanced academically, studying physics at Harvard and astrophysics at Princeton, his thinking became grounded in observation testing and revision. Science offered a framework where questions were welcomed and answers evolved with new evidence. Over time, he concluded that religious explanations of the universe were unnecessary for understanding reality. Rather than declaring hostility toward faith, he simply stopped identifying with religious labels altogether. If belief avoids evidence, should it still claim authority over truth? Tyson has consistently avoided mocking religion or believers. Instead, he emphasizes boundaries. In his view, science explains the natural world through testable claims, while religion often addresses meaning and morality. Conflict arises, he argues, only when religious belief attempts to override established scientific knowledge. This position has made him a frequent critic of creationism and intelligent design, which he sees as incompatible with modern science. Through public projects such as Cosmos, Tyson promotes wonder without invoking divinity. He argues that understanding our place in a 13.8 billion-year-old universe encourages humility, responsibility, and shared stewardship. Meaning for him arises from knowledge and connection, rather than divine command. Neil deGrasse. Tyson did not abandon faith out of resentment. He set it aside after careful reflection, choosing methods that consistently explain the world. His journey reflects respect for inquiry, calm disagreement, and the belief that truth-seeking can unite people even when conclusions differ. Michel Ndegeocello. Michel Ndegeocello's separation from organized religion was shaped by identity experience and a refusal to live dishonestly. Born in 1968 in Berlin to a military family, she was later raised in the United States within a conservative Baptist environment where church attendance, choir participation, and biblical obedience defined moral worth. Like many Black households, faith was presented as discipline, safety, and cultural grounding in a society that often denied dignity elsewhere. As Michel grew older, self-awareness introduced conflict. Realizing she was lesbian placed her in direct opposition to the doctrine she had been taught. Church teachings framed homosexuality as sin, creating years of inner tension marked by shame and fear. Rather than offering compassion, the religious space she knew demanded denial of identity in exchange for acceptance. Over time, faith no longer felt like refuge, but constraint. Music became her language of truth. Entering the industry in the early 1990s, Michel used songwriting to examine power control and inherited belief. Her debut album, Plantation Lullabies, challenged religious hypocrisy and social conformity, while later works deepened that critique. The song Leviticus confronted scripture used to condemn queer people, portraying the emotional harm inflicted when doctrine is weaponized against children. Her break with Christianity was not impulsive. Michel has spoken about learning how biblical passages were historically used to justify slavery, and enforced obedience, reinforcing her view that religion often served systems of control. Eventually, she made a decisive choice to leave the church, entirely stating she would never return to an institution that required erasure of self. Despite rejecting organized religion, Michel did not abandon introspection or meaning. Her later work reflects vulnerability, emotional honesty, and spiritual searching beyond rigid doctrine. She channels depth through music connection and cultural memory rather than worship rituals. In 2021, she won a Grammy for No More Water, The Gospel of James Baldwin, an album rooted in Black intellectual truth rather than church theology. The moment carried symbolic weight, an artist once silenced by religion, receiving recognition through a redefined gospel outside institutional faith. Michel Ndegeocello did not leave belief to provoke outrage. She walked away from a system that demanded silence in exchange for belonging. Her journey reflects courage, integrity, and the cost of choosing wholeness over approval, even when faith was the first tradition she had to release. Queen Latifah. Queen Latifah's spiritual journey reflects loss reflection and a gradual reshaping of belief rather than open defiance. Born Dana Elaine Owens in 1970 in Newark, New Jersey, she was raised in a household influenced by both Baptist Christianity and Islam. Her mother, a school teacher, brought her to church regularly, where Latifah sang in the choir and absorbed teachings centered on discipline, gratitude, and faith in a benevolent God. In a community facing economic pressure and racial tension, religion was presented as moral grounding and emotional shelter. For much of her youth, Latifah embraced these values sincerely. Early success in hip-hop during the late 1980s did not distance her from faith. Instead, she carried religious language and respect into her music and public image. That stability, however, was shattered in 1992 when her older brother, Lance Owens, was killed in a motorcycle accident at just 22 years old. The loss marked a turning point that profoundly altered her inner life. Grief introduced questions that faith could not answer. Latifah later spoke about struggling to reconcile the idea of a loving, protective God with sudden and irreversible tragedy. Prayer did not bring clarity or comfort, and the explanations offered by religion felt insufficient. The sense of divine order she had trusted since childhood quietly collapsed. When tragedy strikes without warning, is questioning God a failure of faith or a human response to pain. As the years passed, Latifah also confronted another conflict identity. Though private for much of her career, she eventually lived openly as a lesbian, a reality that clashed with traditional religious teachings she had grown up with. She came to view organized religion as an institution that often imposed moral judgment, rather than offering understanding, particularly toward women and LGBTQ+ individuals. By the early 2000s, she had distanced herself from both Christianity and Islam, choosing not to identify with any formal faith. Despite stepping away from religion, Queen Latifah did not abandon values. She redirected her focus towards self-respect, compassion, and responsibility, emphasizing love and authenticity over doctrine. Her later life reflects this shift, building a family with her partner, advocating quietly for inclusion, and choosing roles that emphasize strength rather than submission. Queen Latifah did not reject God in anger. She moved away from belief after loss, reshaped her understanding of the world. Her story is not about betrayal, but about redefining faith on personal terms, placing trust not in doctrine but in resilience, love, and the courage to live honestly. Killer Mike. Killer Mike's departure from Christianity was shaped by history, observation, and political awakening rather than personal scandal. Born Michael Santiago Render in 1975 in Atlanta, Georgia, he was raised in a deeply religious Baptist family. His mother sang in the church choir, and his grandfather was a Baptist pastor, making the church a central pillar of his upbringing. From childhood, scripture sermons and gospel music framed his understanding of morality, authority, and salvation. Faith was taught not only as belief, but as obligation. As Killer Mike grew older, lived reality began to challenge inherited doctrine. Growing up in predominantly black neighborhoods marked by poverty, limited opportunity, and over-policing, he noticed a troubling contrast. Churches often grew wealthier while surrounding communities remained trapped in hardship. Sermons emphasized patience, prayer, and obedience, yet offered few concrete solutions to systemic injustice. This gap planted early doubts that deepened with education and political awareness. Reading Black history, Malcolm X and later Marxist theory Killer Mike encountered interpretations of Christianity he had never been taught. He learned that certain biblical passages were historically used to justify slavery and enforced obedience. This realization reframed religion in his mind, not as liberation but as a mechanism of control, imposed during centuries of oppression. The image of a white God saving black people became to him a symbol of psychological domination rather than hope. Music became his tool for confrontation. Through his solo work and later with Run the Jewels Killer, Mike openly criticized organized religion, capitalism, and political complacency. His lyrics challenged churches that preached prayer over action, urging black communities to reclaim agency rather than wait for divine intervention. In 2019, his Netflix series Trigger Warning included an episode titled Church of Sleep, where he directly questioned Christianity's role in maintaining social passivity. Following the 2020 killing of George Floyd, Killer Mike's speeches further clarified his stance. He argued that decades of religious conditioning had taught black Americans to endure injustice quietly instead of demanding systemic change. By this point, he had publicly identified as atheist, rejecting invitations to speak at major churches and distancing himself entirely from Christian identity. Despite abandoning religion, Killer Mike did not reject ethics or responsibility. He emphasizes community organizing, education, and economic empowerment as pathways to freedom. His success, including multiple Grammy Awards, has reinforced his belief that progress comes from action, not prayer. Killer Mike did not walk away from God to shock audiences. He rejected a belief system he concluded had been used to silence resistance. His journey reflects a man choosing historical truth, self-determination, and collective action over inherited faith. John Legend. John Legend's separation from traditional Christian belief unfolded gradually, shaped by experience rather than rebellion. Born John Roger Stevens in 1978 in Springfield, Ohio, he was raised in a strict Pentecostal household where faith governed daily life. His grandmother served as a church organist. His grandfather was a pastor, and from early childhood, Legend was immersed in gospel music. By age 4, he learned piano at church. By 7, he led children's choirs, and by 12, he directed music for adult services, carrying responsibilities far beyond his years. Religion was not presented as guidance alone, but as absolute authority. Secular music, television, and outside influence were restricted, reinforcing the idea that obedience equaled righteousness. For many years, Legend accepted this structure, sincerely believing his talent was divinely assigned and that questioning doctrine meant moral failure. Church shaped his identity, discipline, and early sense of purpose. College life at the University of Pennsylvania introduced new perspectives. Exposure to philosophy, politics, and diverse communities gradually loosened religion's grip. Legend stepped back from regular church participation, yet he did not immediately reject belief. Even after achieving mainstream success with his 2004 album, Get Lifted, gospel influences remained part of his musical language and public image. The decisive rupture arrived through lived reality, not theory. In 2018, Legend's wife, Chrissy Teigen, faced severe pregnancy complications, requiring a medically necessary abortion to save her life. Confronted with rigid teachings that condemned abortion under all circumstances, he faced a moral contradiction impossible to ignore. When doctrine conflicts with saving someone you love, which truth deserves loyalty? That experience prompted deeper examination. Legend openly questioned biblical passages historically used to justify slavery, restrict women's autonomy, and condemn homosexuality. In 2020, he stated publicly that he no longer aligned with the religious beliefs of his upbringing, acknowledging that his views had changed. The response was swift. Pentecostal and evangelical communities that once embraced him accused him of abandoning faith. Despite distancing himself from doctrine, Legend did not discard spirituality or heritage. Gospel music remains cultural memory rather than worship, a sound rooted in Black history. Integrity guided him. Jamie Foxx. Jamie Foxx's spiritual evolution was shaped by experience rather than rebellion or publicity. Born Eric Marlin Bishop in 1967 in Terrell, Texas, he was raised by his grandparents in a strict Baptist household, where church attendance, prayer, and gospel music defined daily life. His grandmother enforced discipline, belief, and routine, and from age 5, Foxx played piano during services several times each week. Secular entertainment was limited, faith was authority, and obedience was expected. As he matured, curiosity began pressing against structure. College life, comedy clubs, and creative freedom exposed him to broader perspectives. Acting intensified that exposure, especially while preparing for his acclaimed portrayal of Ray Charles. Studying Charles's life revealed resilience forged through hardship, not rescue delivered by miracles. That realization quietly challenged lessons Foxx had absorbed since childhood about suffering, reward, and divine intervention. The most decisive shift arrived later through health crisis. In 2019, Foxx survived a serious medical emergency that nearly ended his life. When he spoke about recovery, he thanked doctors, nurses, and modern medicine rather than framing survival as supernatural intervention. For audiences accustomed to religious gratitude, the statement was unexpected, yet measured honest and grounded in evidence. Following recovery, Foxx became more open about distancing himself from organized religion. In interviews, he acknowledged that he no longer identifies as Baptist, emphasizing personal accountability, discipline, and gratitude for human effort. He has also supported reproductive rights and LGBTQ equality positions that conflict with traditional Baptist doctrine, reinforcing his separation from institutional belief. Despite leaving formal faith, Foxx did not discard values learned early. He continues to speak about respect, hard work, generosity, and responsibility, principles shaped during church upbringing, but no longer tied to doctrine. Gospel music remains part of his artistic foundation, valued as cultural heritage rather than worship practice. Jamie Foxx did not abandon faith to provoke controversy or reject his roots. He stepped away because belief no longer aligned with lived reality, experience, and evidence. His journey reflects a man choosing honesty over expectation and gratitude grounded. Frank Ocean. Frank Ocean's break with organized religion was shaped by identity-emotional conflict and years of quiet resistance rather than sudden rebellion. Born Christopher Edwin Breaux in 1987 in Long Beach, California, and raised partly in New Orleans, Ocean grew up in a deeply conservative Baptist environment. Church attendance was constant, prayer was mandatory, and scripture framed morality in absolute terms. From an early age, he sang in the church choir and was taught that obedience to God was inseparable from personal worth. As Ocean grew older, that structure became a source of inner conflict. He realized he was attracted to men in a religious setting where homosexuality was described as sinful and irredeemable. Rather than receiving guidance or compassion, he encountered silence and condemnation. Prayer was offered as a cure, not understanding. This produced years of emotional suppression, fear, and isolation, leaving faith associated not with comfort, but with shame. Music became Ocean's private refuge. After Hurricane Katrina forced his family to relocate to California, songwriting allowed him to process grief, displacement, and identity. Yet the religious tension remained unresolved. In 2011, Ocean published an open letter revealing that his first love was a man. The statement was measured and calm, but it marked a clear departure from the beliefs he had been raised to follow. If prayer demands denial of self, is silence truly faith or simply survival? That conflict was articulated most clearly in his 2012 album, Channel Orange. The song Bad Religion uses religious imagery to describe unreturned love, comparing prayer to a painful, one-sided devotion. Rather than attacking believers, Ocean exposed how faith had become emotionally harmful to him. Later works, including Blonde 2016, continued this exploration, blending gospel tones with lyrics filled with doubt, distance, and unresolved questions about God. Ocean has spoken about undergoing religious counseling and prayer-based attempts to suppress his sexuality during his youth. These experiences reinforced his decision to leave church life entirely. He no longer identifies with organized Christianity and has not returned to regular worship. Yet he has never described himself as hostile toward spirituality. Instead, he rejects doctrines that demand self-erasure. Frank Ocean did not abandon religion for shock value or attention. He walked away because faith as he experienced it required silence, shame, and denial of truth. His journey reflects a man choosing honesty over acceptance, emotional survival over obedience, and self-knowledge over inherited belief. Lil Nas X. Lil Nas X's break with organized religion was shaped by upbringing, identity, and a long internal struggle rather than a desire to provoke outrage. Born Montero Lamar Hill in 1999 in Lithia Springs, Georgia, he was raised in a strict Baptist environment where church attendance, prayer, and scripture were central to family life. From a young age, he sang in the church choir and was taught that faith defined morality, discipline, and personal worth. In that setting, religion was not optional guidance but unquestioned authority. As he grew older, conflict emerged quietly. Lil Nas X realized he was gay in a community where homosexuality was described as sinful and incompatible with God's will. Nightly prayers were meant to change him, not support him. Rather than finding comfort, he experienced fear, guilt, and isolation, learning early that honesty could cost acceptance. Faith became associated with self-denial instead of protection. Music offered escape and expression. As a teenager, he turned to the internet and songwriting, finding freedom and creativity that church life denied. His breakthrough hit Old Town Road in 2019 brought sudden fame, but it also coincided with a pivotal personal decision. At the end of Pride Month that year, Lil Nas X publicly came out as gay, directly challenging the beliefs he had been raised under. His most controversial artistic moment arrived in 2021 with the music video "Montero, Call Me by Your Name." Drawing heavily on religious imagery, the video depicted his rejection of shame and fear, confronting the idea that being gay condemned him to hell. The imagery sparked backlash from pastors and religious commentators who accused him of mocking Christianity. Lil Nas X responded by explaining that the work reflected trauma, not hatred, an attempt to reclaim power from beliefs that once made him feel broken. He continued this confrontation in later projects, including J. Christ in 2024, again using biblical symbolism to question religious authority and inherited guilt. Despite criticism, he has remained clear that his conflict is with doctrine, not individuals. Lil Nas X did not leave faith to shock audiences. He stepped away because the religion he inherited demanded silence and shame. His journey reflects a young man choosing self-acceptance over fear, honesty over obedience, and freedom over a belief system that could not make space for who he is. Angel Reese. Angel Reese's relationship with faith illustrates a modern struggle between inherited belief and personal authenticity. Born in 2002 in Baltimore, Maryland, Reese was raised in a Christian household where prayer and church attendance were common. Like many young athletes, she was taught that discipline, humility, and gratitude came from God, and that success should always be credited upward rather than inward. Before games, faith was often treated as preparation as essential as training. As her basketball talent emerged, Reese became a public figure at a young age. Winning an NCAA championship with LSU in 2023 turned her into a national name almost overnight. With that visibility came expectations that extended beyond the court. For Black female athletes, religion is often assumed rather than chosen, and Reese found herself measured not only by performance, but by how closely she matched an image of faith-driven respectability. Over time, tension grew between those expectations and her lived reality. Reese began expressing confidence, individuality, and personal freedom in ways that drew criticism from conservative audiences. Much of that backlash was framed in religious language, accusing her of straying from values she was presumed to represent. Rather than engaging publicly, Reese quietly stepped away from performative faith, choosing silence over confrontation. If belief must be displayed to earn approval, is it faith or pressure? Unlike older celebrities, Reese did not announce disbelief or attack religion. She simply stopped centering her identity around it. In interviews and social media, she shifted focus towards self-belief, mental resilience, and accountability. Prayer disappeared from public routines, replaced by affirmations of preparation, confidence, and ownership of success. Faith, if present, became private rather than public obligation. Her career continued to rise regardless. Reese entered the WNBA as a top draft pick and expanded her influence through endorsements and media presence. Her success challenged the assumption that religious conformity is required for discipline or excellence. She demonstrated that focused work ethic and self-respect can exist without visible devotion. Angel Reese did not wage war on God, nor did she issue declarations against belief. Her shift was quiet, personal, and generational shift. Faith has long been a foundation of Black history, strength, and survival, but these stories reveal that belief is not immune to challenge. For these 13 figures, walking away from God was not always rejection, but response to grief, science, identity, or moral conflict. Some found religion restrictive, others found it silent when answers mattered most. Their journeys raise uncomfortable but necessary questions about freedom, conscience, and tradition. Is leaving faith a betrayal or an act of honesty? And should belief evolve with lived truth or remain untouched by it? What do you think? Share your perspective below and join the conversation on Legends of Black Excellence.